Hey, it's Matt Lancidel. Welcome to the Inspired to Be Authentic YouTube channel where we talk about everything authenticity. My content is designed for sensitives, empaths, and gay men, but it will serve anybody that is looking to develop more of their authentic self. So today we're going to be talking about how to develop more self-acceptance, the 7 strategies that I want to share with you guys on how to develop more self-acceptance. So this video is for you if you are too hard on yourself, you have a mean inner critic, you are really judgmental of other people, you feel a lot of shame for who you are, and you hide your authenticity from the world by wearing masks. What you're going to get from this video: what does it mean to accept yourself? What are the benefits of self-acceptance? And how can you develop a greater sense of self-acceptance? And like I said, I'll be sharing 7 strategies with you that are going to help you move in that direction. So before we begin, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe so you'll get notified when I release content each week. I also have an Instagram page called Inspired to Be Authentic. If you have not yet followed me over on Instagram, please give me a follow over there. I create very different content to what I share here. It's bite-sized pieces over there. A lot of it is written content, and I do also share videos on my Instagram page that I do not put on my YouTube page. So give me a follow over there and let's connect in the Instagram world. And I also have an account on Patreon. This channel is viewer supported. So if it resonates with you, please consider supporting me on Patreon so I can continue to create awesome content for you to consume. All right, let's jump right in. So self-acceptance. Let's start off with, what does it mean to accept yourself? I pulled up the definition here and I want to read it to you guys. So the act or state of accepting oneself, okay, pretty self-explanatory, and the act or state of understanding and recognizing one's own abilities and limitations. All right, so we're going to be unpacking both of those concepts around abilities and limitations, and looking at the shadow self and how the shadow self is usually one of the major barriers to integrating and having more self-acceptance. So essentially, one of the greatest barriers to authenticity, which is what this channel is all about, is going to be a lack of self-acceptance. And a lack of self-acceptance, one of the greatest barriers is going to be shame. Okay, so if we have a lot of shame, we won't be able to develop self-acceptance. And if we don't have a lot of self-acceptance, we won't be able to step into our authentic self. So we're actually working with shame. All right, so a lot of the work I do in my coaching work and the content I create is going to be around healing shame and trauma, because these are the 2 biggest barriers to developing the authentic self. And when it comes to self-acceptance, they're both actually quite impacted. When you have trauma, your self-acceptance is quite impacted, and when you have shame, your self-acceptance is quite impacted. So we want to look at both. So that's the first thing I want to say about self-acceptance. The second thing I want to say is self-acceptance is essentially shortening the gap between who you want to be and who you actually are, right? The more space in between, the larger the gap, the less self-acceptance that we have. So what we're doing when we're doing self-acceptance work is we're shortening the gap between who we want to be and who we actually are, and we're bringing them into integration, right? Because there's always going to be aspects of our nature that we don't like about ourselves, that we wish they were a certain way, they wish they were different. And when we do self-acceptance work, we're making peace with those things. We're learning how to embrace those things, and in some cases we're learning how to lead with those things and love those things about ourselves. It's just a matter of restructuring the way that we view them. Okay. Self-concept plays a large role in that work, because self-concept is essentially this notion or this concept that it's how we see ourselves, or how we see ourselves in relation to the world around us. So, my self-concept, parts of my self-concept are that I'm a coach, I'm a man, I'm gay, I'm highly sensitive, I'm all these things. These are things that I've internalized, I've taken on from the world around me, and I said, yes, this is how I'm going to participate in the world. This is how I view myself. So self-concept is essentially the way that we view ourselves in relation to ourselves and in relation to the world around us. So this plays a large role in it, because when we view ourselves in certain ways based off of, like, let's say certain conditioning or certain programming or certain messages we heard growing up, this plays a large role in how we feel about ourselves, right? So our self-concept will directly impact our ability to accept ourselves. They are kind of one and the same, really. And I'll share a little bit more about that as we go. So this whole notion of self-acceptance is really about taking everything about us and how we define ourselves and putting it all onto the table. Okay, so we can sort through it and we can say, okay, this is something I like about myself. This is something I don't like about myself, and we need to get real. We need to get real with ourselves. We need to be authentic with ourselves, and we need to put it all on the table. We need to sort through it, and we need to figure out what are the things that we don't like about ourselves. Because sometimes we don't even know. Sometimes it's so deep rooted in our subconscious that we don't even know what these things are specifically. We might understand the feelings about ourselves that we don't like, but maybe we don't understand what those feelings are being caused by, right? So that's going to be kind of part of this journey, is bringing it all onto the table and sorting through it. What else does self-acceptance mean? Well, I put down here to allow yourself rather than resist yourself, right? Allowance of self is flow, right? It's more in that feminine energy. We're allowing ourselves to just be who we are. And when we resist ourselves, we're telling ourselves that it's not okay to be who we are, as we are, right? So one is rooted in love and one is rooted in shame. So we want to essentially practice bringing more allowance in. So you can't actually have self-acceptance without allowing yourself to be as you are. So that's a key to this, and we're going to be unpacking the concept of allowance throughout this video. So what else it means to accept yourself is recognizing shame and working through it. Okay, so we need to be able to understand our shame. We need to be able to understand where our shame is coming from. The shame wounds that we have from maybe, the being different than the rest of society. So you see this a lot in minority groups, right? They often internalize shame because they're different than everybody else. And this whole notion of being different can really bleed over into this something is wrong with me mentality, where that's the mantra of shame, right? Something is wrong with me. And so we need to take that, we need to understand it, we need to understand why we feel like we're different, or that why we're wrong or defective, and then we need to start to work with this. Okay, I created a course called Embody Your Truth course. It is a free course, and it's in my playlist here, or you can subscribe on my website and you can get the course, which is delivered over 7 days, and it's got an email with a bunch of different write-ups and strategies and stuff like that. But if you're just wanting to consume the videos, they're in one of my playlists in my thing here. I'm going to link everything below this video, so just go down there if you're looking to want to start and take that course. It'd be a great place to start if this is the journey that you're looking to solidify. The other thing when it comes to acceptance of self is alignment, okay? Alignment to your truth and living authentically to that truth. Because if we aren't being authentic, we can't actually truly accept ourselves, right? If we're bringing masks forward and we start to get validated or accepted because the masks we bring forward, well, we're not really truly practicing acceptance for ourselves. We're putting forward this fake version of ourselves and then getting validation for that. So we need to be in alignment to what is real and genuine to us, which is the definition of authenticity, right? So we need to be authentic if we want to start to develop more self-acceptance. And then I want to unpack this notion between acceptance and ownership. This whole idea around self-acceptance for me, like when I was going through this journey around being gay, being sensitive, being a demisexual, being all the things that I am that are different from the herd, so to speak, I had this whole notion of I've got to bring these things in and I have to somehow make peace with them, right? And this term self-acceptance for me seems like, yeah, okay, bring them in and I'll deal with them. And it's like, I don't want that. I don't want that feeling towards myself where it's like, okay, I will accept myself. I love the word ownership, right? Self ownership, and that's part of the journey of self acceptance work, right? You reach self acceptance, and then you start to own who you are, right? And that's the thing for me is like I'm now at a place with most of these things where I've practiced enough vulnerability and enough integration of shadow that I'm able to lead with these things. I lead with the fact that I'm a sensitive man. I lead with the fact that I'm a gay man. I lead with the fact that I'm demisexual. I tell people, I share these things. I'm proud of them, right? That's the difference between acceptance and ownership. And I want people to know that this is a process. You work your way towards it. But right now, watching this video, you might be like, I don't think I could ever own this part of me, whatever that is for you, right? But I promise you, there was a time in my life where I was there as well, right? Where I was like, I will never be able to tell people that I'm gay. Well, then I started telling people that I'm gay. And then it was, well, I'm never going to be able to be proud to be a gay man. Well, guess what? I'm proud to be a gay man, right? So it's funny how when we start to shift these things that we once disliked or despised about ourselves, they start to transition and they start to feel softer, and we start to accept them, and then we start to own them, and then we start to connect with other people who are like us, and then we're like, we get even more into the ownership energy because we're like, wow, I'm not weird. I'm not different. There's so many people out there that are like me, right? And I'm having this experience right now around being sensitive, a sensitive person and an empath, because I'm creating community where I'm connecting with people who are exactly like me, and it's so beautiful. I absolutely love it. And if you're somebody, if you're highly sensitive or you're an empath, I just started a community on Facebook called Sensitive Souls Rising, and it's a free Facebook group. I'm building a big, massive community, global community, so we can all start to connect with each other. So come and join me on that. You can find that in my link tree in my bio for this video. Okay, so that wraps up question one. So what does it mean to accept yourself? Okay, those are all the things that I could think of when it comes to the meaning behind self-acceptance. So now I want to move into what are the practical benefits of self-acceptance. So another word for self-acceptance work is going to be shadow work, right? This is a very common term, and it's a very scary term, right? I love the term personally, but I know for some people it's like, wow, like why would I do shadow work? Like things are in shadows for a reason. They're meant to be over there, not with me here, right? But that's the thing about society is we're often so afraid of these shadow aspects that we live in fear, we live in denial, we live in projection, and we don't actually own ourselves. We can't accept ourselves until we've done shadow work. Okay, so shadow work is essentially where we bring in the aspects that we have left in the shadows, left in the closets, and we pull them out, and we sit them all at the table, and we make peace with them, we learn to love them, and then we integrate ourselves, okay? So we're not living in duality or having to hide parts of who we are. We're just completely congruent and authentic to who we are. I have a whole bunch of content, a whole series of videos. I have one video specifically that I'm going to link to this video called "Everything You Must Know Before Doing Shadow Work." I highly recommend watching that video, even before you start your self-acceptance path or whatever. Go to that video because that's going to help you a lot. And also in the Embody Your Truth course, I do talk a lot about shadow work as well. So either way, you're going to get introduced to shadow work in any of my work related to self-acceptance. So when we do shadow work, we find that we are less triggered by people, okay? Because when we have unintegrated shadows, we see them in other people, and what we do is instead of self-judging, we judge other, right? That's projection. So we project onto other, and everybody starts to trigger us because what we see in another that we have yet to integrate in ourselves becomes a trigger. That's what a trigger is, right? So things that people are doing that we haven't integrated yet are going to be the things that bother us. When we do shadow work, we experience less shame, right? Because we're integrating the shameful parts of us. And we notice that we have less self-hatred when we do shadow work, right? So we're able to find more self-love, and through that we find more acceptance for self, okay? So shadow work is a real practical benefit to self-acceptance. Less judgmental of others, which means less self-judgments, right? Exactly what I said before. So projection of judgment is essentially that, right? When we're judging others, we're just really, truly, energetically judging ourselves. And when we're judging ourselves, it means that we have yet to integrate parts of ourselves that we need to integrate. So this is why a lot of this work is done really well in community. It's done really well in group dynamic, because we are able to bring forward and be stimulated by people, and we're able to start to take responsibility for our judgments instead of just hurling them around unconsciously. We're able to say, okay, well, what is it about me that I feel like judging this person? And when you start to get real honest with yourself, it's usually things about yourself that you don't like, and you just don't like them in others, because it's easier to not like them in others than it is to not like them in yourself, right? So this is like the backwards way of understanding what your shadows are, is you look at your triggers. What am I triggered by? And then you're able to notice, okay, well, maybe this is something that I haven't made peace with. Maybe this is something that I've been hiding from myself, right? So it's a really good way to expose these parts of yourself that you need to start to love. More gentle in relating with yourself. That's a really practical benefit of self-acceptance work, because a lot of us are so hard on ourselves, right? And we're hard on ourselves because we're judging the parts of ourselves that we haven't integrated, right? And that we haven't accepted. So when we do this work, when we do self-acceptance work, we find that we are more gentle. We're softer with ourselves, and we're able to allow ourselves to make mistakes without beating ourselves up, right? So a lot of this is going to be really, really beautiful work. This leads to more inner peace, right? When you're more gentle with yourself and you're not putting so much pressure on yourself, it allows you to just be in peace. You're no longer in this state of inner conflict, right? Who I want to be and who I actually am is inner conflict, right? It's really tumultuous to be in that place where it's like constantly battling between these two worlds, and it's happening inside of you, right? So you're going to find more inner peace and less inner conflict when you do this work. And then the reason why I do what I do, okay, more authentic connection. This is everything. This is the reason why I do what I do, because I want people to heal shame. I want people to step into their authenticity, and then from being in your authenticity, you're going to attract the most beautiful, yummy, juicy connections, and that is what I truly live for. I love connection, and I love bringing people into connection, which is why I build community, because I think it's so important. And it's important to continue our healing journey, right? Because when on the self-acceptance journey, we do this work, we get really good at accepting ourselves, but there's also a point we hit where we can only do so much in isolation. We can only do so much on our own, right? Then we need to start to move into community where we can continue our journey, right? Because a lot of the trauma, a lot of the shame that we have as human beings, it requires connection with other people to heal, right? Because shame tells us something's wrong with us and we need to hide who we are. So how does it heal? It heals in connection. It heals in showing yourself to other people. And trauma is the same, right? Especially if you have interpersonal or attachment trauma, it heals in being with other people. So authentic connection is where it's at, in my humble opinion. All right, so number 3, how can you develop greater self-acceptance? This is the meat of it all. So self-awareness, this is going to be number 1. So we want to first off start by shortening the gap between who I want to be and who I actually am, right? So by doing this, what we do is we create a list that we want to start to work on each thing one by one, okay? The thing about shadow work or self-acceptance work is we can't do it all at once, okay? We can't just make this massive list of all the things that we don't like about ourselves and then think that somehow magically we're going to just fix it all or that it's all going to go away. We need to choose things that feel manageable, and we need to start to work through these things. Okay, so journaling is a really beautiful way to start this process. You can start to do some journaling around maybe some of the things that you've struggled with throughout your life. So maybe it's your weight, or maybe it's the color of your skin, or maybe it's your sexuality, maybe it's the fact that you're sensitive and that you're highly emotional, whatever it might be. I want you to start to choose some of these things and get very aware of them, okay? Because without self-awareness, we can't really do this work, right? That's the little seed that's planted that we can start to work and we can start to water. So I always say, kind of bring everything on the table, and then let's pick one thing and maybe, work on that, whether it be with a coach or doing, making a commitment to sitting with your parts of yourself every week and learning ways to love them. Okay, so self-awareness is going to be number one. Number two is allowance. Okay, allowance is such it's one of the most powerful, potent spiritual teachings that you can utilize. We need to practice allowance of everything, right? One of the most important things about authentic relating, I do a lot of authentic relating trainings, is welcome everything, right? Welcome everything. And it's truly, it has to be the way that we approach ourselves, because when we approach ourselves from any other place, we are just going to be fighting with ourselves and trying to fix ourselves into some mold or some idea of who we think we should be. So when we practice allowance, we're literally saying to ourselves, anything and everything goes. I'm bringing everything onto the table. My shadow gets a seat at the table just as much as my light gets a seat at the table. And we start to notice that we're not being selective on the parts of ourselves that get to come forward and the ones that don't. And this is a big part of this work, is we got to start to allow all the parts of us to be accepted, not just the parts of ourselves that we desire. Okay. Number three is going to be drop resistance. So the opposite of allowance is resistance, right? So another way of saying drop resistance is to practice allowing, but I wanted to frame it in two different ways, so I want you to really get that this is really important. So resistance to self creates more resistance to self. Whenever we bring resistance into something, it persists, right? So really dropping resistance it looks like surrendering. It looks like letting go of control. It looks like not hustling for our worth anymore, and just allowing ourselves to finally settle into the worthiness that all that we are is beautiful. Right? And we stop being selective, because that's really what this process is about. It's about not allowing ourselves to continue the path of selecting parts of ourselves that are appropriate and then rejecting the other parts of ourselves. So let everything come forward, let the dam break, and let everything start to flow, because that's what this journey really needs to be about. The next one is do shadow work. Okay, so shadow work is a really important part of this work. I've spoken highly about it previously. I have a lot of content on it. The shadow self, it's kind of that part of ourself that when we start to do the work of shadow work, it really allows us to settle into ourselves. It's I would say it's probably the most challenging work that you'll do on the personal development or the spiritual path, but it has the most payback. Right? Because it is the reason why we've been hiding. It's the reason why we don't love ourselves, why we don't accept ourselves. It's because the shadow is too large and it's lurking, right? So what ends up happening when we give our shadow self a seat at the table, it's something really powerful happens. It's like it doesn't feel like it's being neglected, because the shadow part is still part of us, right? It still needs love. And it still needs acceptance. And when we give it a voice, it stops wreaking havoc in our lives, and it feels acknowledged, it feels heard, it feels loved. Because a lot of our shadows, it's not anything wrong with us. It's things that we think are wrong with us because of the programming that we had. But it's not wrong to be a lot of the things that originate in shadow. Right? Because, if you think about it, shadow is just these aspects of ourselves that we think other people aren't going to like about us if they see it. Right? But then what ends up happening when we do shadow work is we start to feel safe to bring these things forward, and then we realize that other people are just like us, and then they feel safe because they're like, wow, this person's going through exactly what I'm going through, and then we find connection through this, right? So shadow work is really powerful, and it's really important to embrace that journey. Number 5. Start challenging the programming that you have been taught about the things that you don't like about yourself. Okay, for most of us, what we do is we grow up and we develop a self-concept, and then we develop an ego, and then we pay attention to who gets validated in the world around us. It starts in school when we see the popular kids and how they dress and how they behave, and we start to mimic them. And then we start to split from who we authentically are because we're trying to be somebody that we're not. Right? And this happens in all contexts. It happens in gay versus heterosexual. It happens in, people of color versus white people. And then we are all trying to be something that we're not because we think that's going to make us more loving and more accepting of ourselves and from other people. And what we realize when we go through this journey is we have to stop giving away our power to people and systems that taught us what it means to be whatever, loved or accepted or whatever. And I think this is really, really important to note because, for people that are different and that find themselves in minority groups, you will never find acceptance for yourself if you continue to give away your power to the system. And a lot of these social justice warriors, I love you and I respect you, but we need to be our own warrior for ourselves. We need to do the individual work of deconstructing our own programming before the greater system can change. Right? Like as a gay man, like if I sat and I waited for the system to finally give me equality and treat me the way that I deserve to be treated as a human being, I would still be waiting, right? It would be crickets because the system isn't going to do that work for me. I have to do that work. And then once you've integrated that part of you and you found self-acceptance for yourself, then go be a social justice warrior and let your energy speak for yourself. But in that case, what I would say is fight for what you're for, not for what you're against. Right? Because when we fight for what we're against, we're bringing resistance into something that needs allowance, right? So when we're bringing ourselves forward in that way, I think it's really, really important that we start to look at ourselves and say, how did I start to think about myself the way I do? Right? So if you're a person of color and you don't like the fact that you're a minority and that you don't feel like you get treated, right? So start to focus on the things that you do have power over, right? Which is how you feel about yourself. Start to culturally educate yourself on the most beautiful things about being who you are, right? Start to really draw your attention to where you have power. That's going to be a big part of it, as opposed to focusing on what you're not or what you wish that you could be or the inequality that you're getting. Start to flip the script, right? And you'll notice that you're going to start to bring more acceptance to yourself. Number 6 is feel your feelings, okay? This one can't be emphasized enough because self-acceptance is not something we think, okay? This is a misnomer, and we need to break that down because we can't think our way to self-worth. We can't think our way to self-acceptance. We can't think our way to self-esteem. It just doesn't work. We need to have the felt sense of who we are as an innate and beautiful human being. And that happens when we feel our feelings, right? This is the advantage of being a sensitive person, is you are a deep feeler. So it means that you are going to be able to deep feel self-love. You're going to be able to deep feel self-acceptance, right? So, but you need to allow yourself to feel again, especially if you're a sensitive person who was told to deny your sensitivity and to reject it. It means that you've denied and rejected your emotional self, right? So we need to bring that back online. So a lot of the work that I do when I'm coaching clients is I start to plug back in. Let's plug you back into your emotional body so we can start to do this work, right? And that is the work of the divine feminine. The divine feminine is the healing part of us, right? And if we're not tuned into our emotional world, we can't heal, right? The saying goes, if you're not feeling it, you're not healing it, right? So we need to plug back into our emotional world by feeling our feelings. Really important stuff. Lastly, get out of your mind and into your body. This kind of goes along with number 6 as well, because when we're in our mind so much, we can't think our way to feeling better about ourselves. We need to feel it in our body. It's an embodied state, right? Self-acceptance is an embodied state. We need to feel it in our body. And this happens by connecting to our feminine energy, right? The feminine, and when I say masculine, feminine, I'm not talking about gender. We all have feminine, we all have masculine inside of us, and you can frame it as yin or yang or whatever floats your boat. But I frame it in masculine and feminine because I have both inside me, and my feminine is very embodied in my body, and my masculine is very cerebral in my mind. They're both equally valuable and beautiful, but you're not going to heal from your mind. The masculine is not about healing, right? It's about doing and achieving, and reading the books, and going to the courses and working on that stuff and all that. And then we need integration, right? We need to slow down. We need to be with all the work we've been doing. But a lot of us get caught in the hamster wheel of doing and trying to do all the work and hustling for worth to finally accept ourselves. And then we just hit a wall where we're like, I can only go so far. Why is this not sticking? Because we haven't integrated. We haven't been with the feminine, the slowed down yin version and energy that we need to in order for us to feel into the embodiment of what it feels like to accept ourselves. Okay, that is huge. So when in doubt on this journey, slow down. Slow down and start to ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What sensations are going on in my body? Leave the mind and come down into the body. And I think that's going to really help. I wrote the book Be the Space. And it is a memoir and a loving guide that's going to show you how to make that transformation from your head to your heart. I wrote it when I was living in Asia, when I was making that transformation myself and learning how to transition from my head to my heart. So yeah, that would be a great place to start as far as how to start to connect with that. There's actually a couple sections in the book specifically on self-acceptance and how to make that possible. So all right, so that's the 7 strategies on how to start to develop a greater sense of self-awareness. Now I want to hear from you. So share in the comments below, please. What are you working towards having more acceptance around? This is really important, and the reason why I asked that question specifically is because I want people to be able to read the comments, and I want people to be able to see what other people are grappling with. Because you'll realize is when you read through the comments, you're like, that person's really like they're worried about themselves, or like I wouldn't really be worried about that, or whatever. And it makes us really realize that we're all in our own little world thinking that we need to be a certain way to be loved and accepted, but really we're all just putting this pressure on ourselves. No one's really putting that pressure on you, right? Maybe they are, but that's usually just an extension of their own self-judgment, right? So I would love to hear from you and what you're learning to accept more about yourself in the name of community. So feel free to share vulnerably. I will be responding in the comments to your guys' comments as well. So much love. Thanks for tuning into another video, and we'll have a beautiful day.